Hey, this is podcast number 3. This is Jeremy.
And this is Daniel.
Today we're going to be talking about nihilism and absurdism, existentialism, and all that good philosophical jargon over in shows like Rick and Morty.
Yeah. And I think it's a very popular topic, and there's a lot to talk about, so take it away.
What's interesting about nihilism and existentialism and all that is, as Nietzsche said, God is dead, and people are trying to find purpose in their lives outside of religion nowadays. And these branches of philosophy are kind of the types that, say there is no objective meaning in life. Exactly. Existentialism says you have to find your own. Nihilism says, there is none, and absurdism is pretty much along the same lines.
Exactly. So I think one of the main underlying tones of Rick and Morty is that it kind of explores the conflict between the human experience to try to seek and find meaning in life, and then they go on all these adventures and they do all these things, yet they can never actually find something that sticks and that actually really helps them find that purpose, like you were talking about before. And that's obviously where the existential and nihilism tones, and even absurdity, because they just do all this crazy stuff like fight aliens on other planets and warp between dimensions and have all these things that really don't make any sense, but they do them almost just to do them.
I don't think you could say it's existentialist as far as Rick and Morty goes. You could say it with something like BoJack Horseman, but existentialism would mean that the characters would have to be finding their own meaning and making it. But in Rick and Morty, like, making your own meaning is like actively discouraged. Like, look at the episode where Rick and Morty, Cronenberg their whole world, then go to another one where they died.
Exactly.
I mean, there's no value in family, no value in anything. It's just nihilist. I mean, really.
It's like they almost can't control like the mess that they're creating at the same time.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, like what you're talking about too. So after they do that, they bury the bodies and they go into another dimension, and then they slip right back into their own selves from that reality, and then nobody else notices what's going on. So it's almost like they only have that capacity to know how fucked up everything is.
Yeah. Yeah, and even if everybody could know how fucked up it was, that doesn't change it. It's just the fact there's no meaning. What's the one quote Morty says this summer? I buried myself in the backyard. Yeah. Nobody belongs anywhere. Come watch TV. It's like the most nihilistic thing you could say.
It's like one of the the crux points of like the entire thing, where everything just shuts off, and then you're like, okay, you just accept that point at that time.
Where it gets into a little bit of Albert Camus' absurdism is he thought like the best thing you'd be was like the absurd hero, which was someone who knew you didn't really have a choice in life. You just went along with whatever life threw at you, but you just did it anyway. You just kind of like embraced it, and that's pretty much what you see. Rick and Morty both doing. I'd say mainly Rick because, he's the one who's really in charge of everything.
Yeah, exactly. And at the same time, too, like a very pervasive tone in it is like, don't think about it. Like, Morty, just come and do this. We're just doing the adventures. Like, don't think about it before you just jump in. But at the same time, Rick's like this genius who builds all this stuff and has all this knowledge and capability. And yet he's almost like discouraging people from going that path because it's obviously just turned him into a raging alcoholic and kind of an asshole.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting that shows like this are really getting a bigger audience now. I read something that millennials are like the biggest generation for like atheist numbers.
Yeah, I think that has a lot to say and do with like the political and racial and just regular societal overtones, especially in America as well, because so many people are flocking to this. And if you can see it kind of from an outside perspective, if like somebody from a different older generation was watching this, they would just think it's either stupid or kind of pointless and all those things. But a lot of people see that in it for what it's worth and actually take something from it, even though you're not necessarily supposed to.
I don't think anyone's really taking like life lessons out of Rick and Morty. I think it's, I mean, what do you think?
I feel like after a lot of the episodes, especially if they end on like a sad tone or something that mentions, like, I think you can actually really think about what's going on.
Like, name a particular time.
So the time where he it's in the first season where he creates the little robot that just goes around and passes butter on the kitchen table, and the robot is kind of sentient and it asks, "What is my purpose?" And then he says, "You pass butter," and then the robot goes, "Oh my god!" Like, it has that existential crisis like right there.
Yeah, but what's the life lesson you learned from that?
That basically we all amount to just robots passing butter. Like, we don't really have something to really hold on to.
That's not a life lesson. That's just nihilism. I mean, that's in every single episode.
Yeah, I know.
The theme of creator and created all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at the episode with the meme verses. Like, he does the same thing with a whole universe to power his car.
Yeah.
And there they have a Miiverse to power their stuff and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
It's just that whole thing of again, straight back to all the philosophy. You can't really have an objective meaning given to you by a creator.
Yeah. What do you think about the medium they chose? So they chose cartoons to kind of say all these things and do all these things. Like, do you think it could have the same impact if it was like a regular live action show, or if it had a different setup? Or is it just because, like, cartoons, so we can look at American Dad, Family Guy and stuff, all those are mainly just kind of like,
The
stupid humor
animes.
and stuff like that. Yeah. But it's almost kind of like, it's not looked at as the most, like, best form of cinema or something like that, too. Like, nobody's, like, going, like, cartoons aren't winning awards and stuff like that, too, in this context.
Yeah, well, I mean, it makes the most sense
Does it
for the
make it
show.
easier?
When you're traveling from dimension to dimension, can you imagine someone having to produce like a set for every like 5 minutes they're in somewhere? It's so much cheaper to have someone just draw it.
I agree.
I mean, that's why like when you see like animation over in Japan, like the kind of stories they can cover are just a lot more, just a lot broader because you have all that freedom.
You don't really have any limitations.
Yeah, it's cheaper. I mean, not to say that paying animators is cheap, but it's cheaper than paying set producers over and over and over, especially when they're not even in the same place from like for any 2 episodes.
Yeah, and I think it just makes it more accessible too as well. So you're not invested in like a specific actor or something. You don't have that different context. I mean, yeah, the people's voices, but it's kind of like detached from it a little bit. So you don't have that same kind of like drama behind a certain TV show episode where people get invested in the characters.
I'm very attached to Justin Roiland, so I'm offended by that.
Oh, okay.
He's hilarious.
Well, I agree
Have you
with
seen
that.
him when he called into who's the big evangelist church over in Texas? He called in there trying
Joel
to...
Osteen?
Yeah, he called Joel
yeah.
Osteen's church's Rick trying to get someone to sleep. It was really funny.
Yeah, and I also really like the dub they did of that court case in Georgia, where they put Rick as the defendant and Morty as the judge, and they went through that whole thing, and it was it was a real transcript, but they put it in that kind of light, and it was obviously hilarious and making fun of it and stuff too, but at the same time like that was real stuff going on, and they were able to like take that and make it something completely different.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. And that's just Justin Roiland's voice for both of them.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm bleep bloop, and we like to do some blah bloops.
Like,
Like you can say anything. It's hilarious.
Exactly.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean these kinds of shows, it's not just limited to Rick and Morty either. Like if you jump over to a show like BoJack Horseman, it's not quite the same nihilistic undertone. They always present, I'd say they're more existentialist because I think they proudly put out that notion that you can create your own meaning.
Exactly.
It's just that BoJack's shit at it in the show.
Yeah. I mean, he's just like a self-defeatist at most points, like where he's just kind of actively sees a situation and kind of knows the right and the wrong thing to do and just actively chooses the wrong one.
Yeah, but you have other characters like take Mr. Peanut Butter or Todd, who are just full of positivity, just wake up one morning and go, I want to be governor, or I want to start a.
And we all know people like that that are just kind of like almost ignorant to the point where you can't believe it, or they kind of just live their lives like nothing else is going around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you see other like existential concepts like what's his name, John Paul Sartre.
Yeah.
He had this. I think he's like the main guy for existentialism. You
French
could argue
philosopher
people
in the
like
40s,
Nietzsche said it earlier, but I think he's the one who really kind of put it down.
He definitely popularized it and like romanticized it for sure.
His whole notion of bad faith, like you can definitely see that with BoJack. Bad faith is like you don't want to create meaning for yourself, so you like want to get validation stuff from like that from other people. Like, what should I do? What's my purpose? All that, and you can see BoJack, going through the episodes. Like I think sometime in season 1, he goes up to Diane and wants her to tell him that he's a good person because she was her, wrote a book about him and she knows the most about him.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of.
Yeah, in that case, it's more about the circumstances than the individual, because he already sees himself as kind of broken, and then later in season 3 and stuff too, they go into backdrops of like his mother's upbringing and then his grandparents and kind of all those other situations that affected him and kind of made him into this. I use that term loosely because I think nature and nurture both definitely play a big role, but that's definitely the nurture that's shining through there.
Yeah, it's pretty dark. I mean, you could say Rick and Morty does some darker things, but like that episode with the cannibalistic incest and all that.
Yes.
I think that's fucked up, but the way it's presented, it's just it's
comic.
Yeah, like when they do the episode about like BoJack's mom or like like the one where he almost fucked his friend's daughter.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's just like it's not like the same like crazy cartoonish extreme, but it like feels like you
It
just
feels real almost.
yeah, it's messed up. Like you have to take a second and be like, what the fuck?
Yeah, exactly. And then the same thing too. They use the cartoons and then the animals to kind of almost like de-anthropomorphize the situation, kind of like make it so it's not human at the same time. To kind of lighten the mood almost.
Yeah, they're really good at that. They'll do something. They'll keep it really light with all these animal puns and silly, things, and then it just gets real out of nowhere. It's like life, like you just, oh, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna make a cat like a latte. Gonna get some pumpkin spice. You joke around with your buddies, and then all of a sudden some crazy shit happens. You're
And
like,
you don't know how to deal.
yeah, that's how it happens. They're good at portraying things.
Yeah. So what do you think about maybe a tone in Rick and Morty where it's more active or passive nihilistic? So active being they're going out and doing all these things and just kind of creating havoc and stuff like that too, but then the passive where it's almost like they're just accepting it at the same time. Like which one of those do you say you more identify with?
So you accept either way, but one you just actively add to. You're like a militant.
Well, it's like
nihilist.
it's like
That's such a weird
it's
thing.
like the notion of Nietzsche like shouting into the void kind of. So like even though you know all these things and you have the kind of same end point, it's like how do you get there?
I present like Nietzsche as an existentialist. I don't think he's a nihilist. He says a lot of things bad. Like he really says a lot of things that he doesn't like about nihilists. He hates them.
Yeah.
That's his whole thing. Is he thought we needed to replace, our notions of like God and everything with something. He didn't think science was enough because of how cold and it leads to nihilism if you don't have anything else with it. You need purpose. So I mean, if you're going, I guess if you'd call an active nihilist what I would call an existentialist, then.
I honestly think they're more related and similar than they are different.
Yeah, an existentialist and a nihilist look at the world and see the same thing, but the existentialist is like, well, there's no meaning, but
I can make my own.
Yeah, and the nihilist just goes, I'm a sad man, I'm going to make no meaning, and it's pathetic.
Yeah, but then you see people like that too. I think a good example of this is like the Joker in The Dark Knight, Batman, where he kind of, he just wants to watch the world burn. And he's kind of like actively going out of his way to like ruin things.
Yeah, he's like an existentialist in that regard, right?
Yeah, I could say that too.
I mean, if he's trying to make his own meaning by watching the world burn, I mean, it's a weird meaning,
So
but
there's like no true nihilist, or they would just, shoot themselves once they turned into a nihilist.
no, I don't think you'd shoot yourself. I just think you'd be really sad. Like, in The Big Lebowski, have you seen that?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a really good representation. They hang out at Denny's all night and just smoke cigarettes. They don't have anything to do.
Go bowling.
Yeah, they go. Yeah, just yeah.
I think that's like, well, I mean, they're still
And they have a ferret. I think that makes sense. I think if you're gonna be a nihilist, you have to own a
a
ferret.
nihilistic ferret.
Yeah, aquatic nihilistic ferret.
Aquatic, right.
When they dropped him in that bathtub, he just knew what he was doing.
And then he almost drowned, yeah.
Did the ferret drown? I don't remember.
No, they
oh,
just-
good.
A funny thing is that Flea, the bass player from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, was in that scene where they all went to the bathroom and stuff and tried to drown the guy. Fun fact.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Apparently, a lot of people have been in the background of Game of Thrones that are like singers and everything. Besides
Ed Sheeran.
yeah, besides Ed Sheeran. I don't know why.
Sheeran.
Yeah, Sheeran. I don't know who he is.
Yeah.
I just saw him and I was like, why are they on this dude's face for so much?
Yeah, you just make money that way.
Make money. Any other good examples of like shows like this that are?
I think we should talk about The Simpsons a little bit because that show's been around for almost 30 years. It's the longest standing show, I think, in a row consecutively so far. And obviously,
Be honest,
it
I've
comes
never
from a
seen it.
different- What?
I've never seen it. To be
You ever
honest.
seen The Simpsons? Well, I mean, okay, so Homer's like the classic, like, dumb guy, just gets drunk, eat lots of food, and this kind of like hangs out. And I still think that you could draw some parallels even between, I'd say more so BoJack, even though BoJack's a lot more aware of his circumstances and the situation, and Homer's just kind of like the ignorant guy that just kind of does stupid stuff and gets laughs out of people. I don't know. You definitely need to watch it.
Yeah, I mean, even if your life doesn't have meaning, I think you have to know about it to be considered one of these categories. Like, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we want to call somebody who had a meaningless life, but was like, certain when they died they were gonna go to some afterlife, and everything they did was for God, even if they're wrong.
Or
You're not gonna say they're a nihilist
Yeah.
or an
Or
existentialist.
if you just accepted and said, no matter how I lived my life, I would get whatever outcome that I wanted. If a certain afterlife, or if I didn't believe anything was afterwards, and I just lived my life whatever, and disregarding the potential future situation, in quotation marks there. I think it's a really fun and a really relevant issue to talk about.
Yeah.
Especially, like, you can even turn this to more of the political climate, like Donald Trump, who's basically a human life cartoon, giant toddler baby, in a lot of aspects that people like to point out and kind of almost draw that comparison to. Like, a lot of people would say that he doesn't have those kind of intellectual things, and he kind of just goes and does stuff because he wants to, or just be the big bad leader or something like that too. Not saying that's necessarily the whole case, but I think it's really interesting.
I don't know. He has
it's almost like you could compare the two, almost in some aspects.
I don't know, man. His origin story is compelling. You remember that correspondence dinner where Obama was making fun of him?
Yeah, there's a really good...
you just see him brewing and planning.
Yeah, there's a really good
what a montage
Stephen
after
Colbert episode where they turn Donald Trump into a cartoon.
Yeah.
And it's for the correspondence dinner in 2011. Yeah, that was really interesting.
As soon as he started running, I was thinking about that dinner. I was like, he wants his job. He's going to take his job in his house.
He's going to take the black man's job in the house.
Oh, I'm sure Obama has more. He's rich.
Oh, yeah, he's got a lot of money now. He did a couple of conferences, I think, for like $400,000 each. Just for like a couple hours of talking.
Yeah, he's loaded.
That's pretty awesome.
It's like, and I would like to say to you, the bankers of Wall Street, that we will give you more money. That I have my friends to enjoy that I appointed. Thank you. Yeah. Give me money now, please.
Pretty much. So
everybody's corrupt.
I think that's a good place to stop. Kind of like drawing it, going all the way through Rick and Morty, BoJack Horseman. We brought up The Simpsons, and then kind of relating it to the political climate a little bit too as well. Yep. I think there's just a strong vein through the society of this kind of tendencies and philosophies that are kind of making a resurgence. Yep, and underrepresented. So anytime one pops up, those shows just get crazy, views. They get crazy popular, and it's almost like people don't know why. But then if you think about it a little bit deeper and kind of see these kind of things, I think it's pretty cool. Yep. Well, I guess that's it for this podcast. We'll see you all next week. All right. Bye. Bye.